Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Lee from DECA Games. I've been in publishing for 10 years. I previously was head of publishing at a Hong Kong-based publisher called Six Waves. So if you guys have questions about Asian publishing, happy to talk to you about that as well. At DECA Games, we basically are very different because we take over existing games. We're not marketing experts. We don't launch new games. We help you with your existing live titles. So nice to meet everyone and looking forward to the panel.
Hey guys, I'm on Luong from Miniclip, and gosh, I've been working in the industry for well over 15 years now. I'm a lot older than I look. I mean, we're primarily here today to meet with great developers, look for great content, and strike up some really great partnerships. Miniclip, if you don't know, we're a developer and publisher of mainly sports multiplayer type titles, but we're super keen to look at any other content that you guys may have. And yeah, just looking forward to meeting with some of you guys.
Hi guys, I'm Saad from Tilting Point. I do corporate and business development at Tilting Point. We're a publisher in New York City. And for those of you guys that don't know Tilting Point, we work again with live games. We focus on scaling live games for user acquisition, working with you on live ops, as well as bringing the game and getting featured on new platforms. So yeah, hopefully look forward to meet some of you. Oh, sorry, you got one.
I'm Allison from JoyPac. We're a publisher focused on casual and hyper-casual games, helping you get into China and APAC, although we also have some global operations that we're spinning up right now as well. So yeah, looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. I've got some questions from the community that we have on our social media from developers, because I'm working with developers. And I just put them all together. And I want to start with a small game. So imagine that with all the experience you have in the publishing, after years in publishing, right? You came up with an amazing idea, you gathered an awesome team, and now it's time to release your game. You created like really cool game, the best seller ever. But now you need to make a fortune with it, right? To get some success. And the question that was from the audience and from our community is that, are you going to launch this game yourself, self-publishing, or are you going to approach the publisher? And of course, we want to know why. Sure, Stefan.
I think a good place to start is to basically look at your own, understand your own studio, your own team, and what your competencies are. So there's a lot of really strong developers out there. Obviously, some of them are here and at this event. But there's, building a team that's also really strong at marketing, user acquisition, is not the easiest thing to do. So I would say, if your expertise is purely on development, there is a chance you can still self-publish. It depends on the genre of game and what your launch strategy is. Some people have had success with self-publishing and just working on featuring and platform relationships and things like that. So that's always possible. But these days, I think, depending on your genre, most of the time, if your objective is to make millions, as you just mentioned, you'll probably need to spend millions as well in order to make that. And that usually requires someone with not only marketing knowledge, but also the marketing budget that has the ability to take that risk on behalf of developers. So, I guess the short answer of that long segue is basically understand what your competencies are. If you're really not knowledgeable about marketing and go-to-market strategy, how to launch a game, then for sure it makes sense to, at the very least, talk to publishers, as many as you can, to understand what is the best strategy and get their expertise before you decide ultimately whether or not to self-publish or work with a partner.
Yeah, I agree. I think having an assessment of your team and where you want to be putting your game as well, from the Asia, China in particular perspective, you need to be working with the local partner in China anyway around the regulation that you need to be dealing with. And then also, for particular markets, there are certain marketing channels and advertising partners that you need to tap into as well. So it's really, do you want to handle that yourself, or can you build a team capable of doing that, or do you want to hand it off? And yeah, for China in particular, it's very important.
I mean, to me, like what Steve said before, it's about your capabilities but also what you're looking for to get help on, right? I mean, a lot of times to go to market strategy, you need a full product team. If you're a developer starting off, chances are that you don't have a full product team, right? Or you don't have a community manager, someone for influencer relations as well, or you don't have a UA team that can help you figure out what's the right icon to test, which will resonate with the marketplace as well, right? Because you're so busy developing the game, there's all those other factors that you may be overlooking or you may not be focusing on, which a publisher can really help you kind of bring to market.
Thank you. So my question, I'm Alok from Games to Win. We're a publisher of dress-up, parking, and driving and narrative games, but 230 million downloads. And the question for all of you is portfolio approach versus single title. So we see a lot of success in making successive, high-quality driving and parking games. There were 140 type of cars in the world, and everybody wants to drive each one of them. So we keep making them, and we keep millions of downloads in them. And similarly, dress up, right? There are huge amounts of dress up games from the biggest to the micro ones. So the question is, in the last 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years, are you seeing is it a prophecy? For example, hyper casual gets a lot of titles out and then they die. In games like ours, they don't die. They continue to sustain themselves. So my only question as a founder CEO is, I'm doing okay right now, but do you see any red flags for the future? And just portfolio versus one game that you keep building and building on.
Go ahead.
That's a very good question. I mean, if you look at Miniclip, one of our best performing titles and one that has consistently done well over the years is 8 Ball Pool. And for us, we focused on that game for a number of years, and every time we think we're going to see it decline, it just gets bigger and bigger. So I think to your point, great games will stay, great games will last, and I think if you focus on making a great game, that's kind of what you need to do kind of as a developer, and then everything will kind of start to center around that. I mean, hyper casual is fantastic, and it really serves a very specific, well, to be fair, specific and also broad audience. But to say that it's potentially a fad, is probably incorrect, because there's always going to be people that want to play that type of game. So I think it's here to stay. But whether or not you want to move into that, or you want to kind of focus on what you're doing now, it's entirely your call. But as long as you keep producing great content, you should have the confidence that your business and your players are going to stick around.
One thing I'll add on top of that, I mean, especially with casual games, there's definitely some network effects. So that's something to think about. But let's say you're developing core games, mid-core games. You may get opportunities from other developers that reach out to you and say, hey, you've had a lot of success with your first game. Can you help us do the same thing, right? And if the numbers make sense, then why not? I think it also makes a lot of sense too. So I think you really have to kind of see how things go, but definitely focus on what you do best, and that will probably inform your future decisions.
I think to go back to your question on portfolio versus going deep down in one game, I would say, especially in today's market, it makes a lot more sense to go deeper in one game itself. Again, it depends what your objective is. Is it to get reach, and is it monetization through ads, or is it through in-app purchase? If it's through in-app purchase, it makes sense, again, to be adding features and content in that game itself. I mean, a few years ago, the market wasn't as competitive as it is today, right? So it's very hard for people to find an application in the marketplace as 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, if you look for Candy, you get 200 games, right? So in that regard, it helps to do user acquisition, and you can only do user acquisition if your game's LTV is strong, and you've been fostering the strong LTV by adding a lot of content on the back end.
I think I disagree on the going deep into one game. The hyper casual play is about, yeah, it's a different genre for sure. These hyper casual players move through content really quickly. You might get them to play your game for a 4-day lifetime. And so it's just a really different play. And of course, then in hyper casual, you're building up a portfolio still. You might have some games that have a longer tail, but it's all about kind of growing your user base through lots of different content, and also finding what works. I think the risk factor in that as well.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is specific to the different categories of games, but could you give us your input in terms of what figures you're looking for casual mobile games for ARPDAU, LTV, and retention?
What figures we're looking for? We assess a game based on its profitability, and there's a lot of numbers that go into that. Because we're driven by advertising monetization, it is actually ad ARPU, but we break that down actually into the marketability of the game, how the UA will happen in terms of click-through rates and conversion, getting to your IVR. So that's a key one for us. And then looking at retention. We actually look at marketability first and then retention second, because retention, you need a minimum benchmark for your day one retention, but what's going to tell you if you're going to make money in a game is actually day 7 retention and beyond. But because of hyper-casual, we don't actually go beyond that. We're looking at that day 7. Yeah, those are really key for us, are those two.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, and then the ad monetization comes in secondarily, but that's actually what we do as a publisher, is help you optimize on the UA as well, but then also on the ad monetization piece.
Thank you. It's actually a really good question. I would like everybody to reply, like, what metrics should I prepare to be considered to be published by you as a developer?
I think to echo Allison's point, marketability for publishers is most important. And marketability, I think, it comes down to ROAS, is when you spend dollars in advertising, how much money can you make back on that $1 and how quickly, right? So that that ROAS in itself is already a function of retention and monetization, right? So if you were to tell me what metrics am I looking for, we're looking for ROAS profitability and the payback on that dollars. So if the retention, for example, I mean, could be 1% hypothetically, right? But if the monetization is so high, then you probably, the function of it, you could still be profitable in marketing. Conversely, retention could be really high and monetization is low, but then again, it could be profitable as well. So the second thing there is, on the flip side, is what is the CPI, right? When depending on what genre you're in or which IP you go to market with, if the lower the CPI is, chances are the game is more marketable and we can scale it for you.
Yeah, very much the same as Allison and Saad here. Again, retention is very important for us as well, because that gives us a good indicator of how, how long and how kind of, the audience, I guess, in terms of, their playability is for the game. Beyond that, we do look at DAO as well, and we look at potentially how we can, help to scale it. What Miniclip is great at is helping to really scale games and scale very, very quickly. But beyond that, yeah, it's very much the same.
Okay. Do I really need to? Okay. So it really depends on the genre, as these guys have already mentioned. When we actually analyze a game at DECA Games, it's actually quite different, because for most of the games that we're taking over, they're several years old, right? So those audiences have already settled, and the retention is actually quite high, because it's pretty much a stable audience for a long time to come. So that's good to see, but it's not a must for us when we look at games. So, but for example, like, retention is always super important. But for example, the game that we just acquired in Q4 of last year, it's our first casual title. The retention is actually quite low relative to a mid-core game. But we get so many organic downloads from that game that the revenue and the DAU is quite steady. So retention is not always the right answer. It's ROI, as you mentioned. But when I was publishing, mid-core games in Asia, we would definitely look at, as far as, at least day 30, we need to know what that number is at. It should hopefully be in double digits. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to spend marketing over a long term. But yeah, everything depends. Every game is different. But yeah, happy to dive in further separately if you're interested. Sure.
It's really nice that you talk about retention, but those metrics can be visible only for those games who already published, right? But you publish not only the soft launch, but do you actually publish the games that are not launched and not published yet? And if you do, like, you can't know the retention for those, right? How then you choose the games?
You mean the games that are already live or games that are in production?
You can get retention only from games that are already published or soft launch, right?
I see, yeah.
But if the game is not published yet, if it's not soft launch, will you consider those games as games that are viable for you to publish? And what metrics do you rely on, or how do you choose those games?
We look for games that are already, that are at least finished, that we can test. So if we take a look at a game that's got nice polish, it's got good gameplay, we're very willing to test with you. We ask the developer to put in a couple of SDKs for measurement, and then we put some users in particular markets. So we really need those numbers to enter into a full publishing deal. So yeah, the testing comes. I know there are some publishers that go really early stage and would just look at a concept, but that's not our model.
I want to say the same thing too, is that increasingly publishers are stepping away from publishing games which are early stage. I mean, a tilting point is probably focused on live publishing, which is taking games which are already either in soft launch or have already launched as well. But I know in my past life, we were focused on concepts, but then if you're looking at in alpha games which are in alpha or just in PowerPoint, then you focus on the game team. You sort of see what the game team is. Have they done this game before? Do they have the chops to finish it and bring it to the finish line? So it comes down to your pedigree and your experience.
Miniclip typically looks at games at all stages, so just not soft launched or published titles. We look at titles that are at concept stage, that potentially all we have is a prototype or even just a deck. And what that boils down to really is, again, what type of team is there? Do they have any pedigree? Do we love the idea? Is it very, very similar, or does it have big affinity with our audience or the type of titles that we have currently? I mean, we don't discount anything. Obviously, it's a lot easier for us to publish titles that have already launched and then to take and help scale that up. But likewise, we never want to discount those really kind of cool gems that sometimes you see and you think, wow, with a bit of investment, this could be really, really kind of great. It really just depends.
To be considered to be published by Miniclip, is it better to reach you when it's early stage, or it's almost finished, or already released? What is your advice?
To be fair, at any stage, we're super open to that. I'd say if you can, and if you are able to do a soft launch and get some of your own metrics, then that always helps. But ultimately, if you feel you've got a great game idea, just come to us. That's the easiest way. Contact us. Put across what your idea is, and we can only say no at that time, and then revisit it. We always keep the door open.
So let's say I've already talked to a publisher and they have already helped us with testing and a soft launch. Let's say that I step to another publisher. Would I be able to reuse those metrics and say, like, this is what we've already done with them, and is that valuable? Okay.
Yeah, always happy to look. And also if you've been rejected by another publisher, it doesn't mean that another one wouldn't pick you up, because there's maybe they're using different audiences, different techniques for running those UA tests. So there's always a possibility.
Thank you.
I mean, I would say if you're still in contact with a publisher, I would just look at the legal agreement to make sure you can share the data. Right. Well, other than that, it's okay.
Yeah, nothing to add there.
Actually, for the guys in the audience that have already worked with a publisher, just curious, would you guys work with that same publisher again? Would you work for any publisher again? Or what are your plans for your next launch? Are you going to self-publish, or would love to hear feedback from you guys?
Actually, like my publisher, but sometimes, revenue sharing is a good opportunity, but sometimes, fixed payment is a good choice. I will decide, I will show my game again, and we will decide together with publishers. Yeah.
That's
cool.
actually really interesting. A lot of people ask how to actually write the contract, how to negotiate with the publisher to get the best deal for you. So just imagine again that you're a developer, you just really make a really awesome game. You're not publishing anymore, you quit. With a great idea, and you want to publish it. How would you negotiate with the publisher to get the best deal?
So happy to share this. I mean, we could give a whole separate talk about this. Feel free to approach us afterwards. A couple things you can do. Definitely take your game to multiple publishers and figure out what they're willing to offer. If they're really serious about your game, they should, put their money where their mouth is and demonstrate that in terms of the business terms. Things to look out for. Definitely do not sign away your IP if you can avoid that. I shouldn't be saying this as a publisher, but definitely take care. Like, it's shocking sometimes when I've meet developers and they tell me that, okay, unfortunately we can't because we've signed this away forever or something like that, and it's just be careful there. I would say at a very high level, any business term is negotiable with the publisher. There is no standard, right? And if you're talking to the right person, there is always flexibility in those terms. So. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I would approach
Won't it be more interest for a publisher, to promote the game and push it more if they own a little bit of IP?
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, it's ultimately something that's created by you guys. So I know when we sign deals, IP is not a deal breaker for us. So that's always something that can be negotiated. If someone tells you they must have IP, then you'll find someone that doesn't need it.
I think the other thing I would be cautious about is length of term. You want to make sure that publishers working hard for those 3 or 4 years that the term is with them. You don't want to sign away the game forever, because then the incentives to work hard obviously are gone. The second thing is, while you're choosing a publisher, comes to Steve's point, you talk to a lot of them, but you find a publisher which has experience and can add value. To your point earlier, you're sharing revenue with the publisher, so you want to make sure they're growing the pie as opposed to just taking half of what you're already making.
Yeah, one thing that we are kind of anti at JoyPac are minimum guarantees. We think I can understand why a developer would want a minimum guarantee in a publishing deal, that they get this money up front, but it doesn't last, essentially. The relationship doesn't last after that minimum guarantee, typically. So what we're trying to set up is longer-term shared success, and there are nuances in the contract that can lead to that you should be looking for.
Thank you. The time is run out, so if you will have any questions and you were shy to ask this, like in public, you can find the publishers like in this hall and ask them after the session. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.